Anyway, welcome to Rules Explained. I'm John Merritt.
Now I'm Rob Nothing.
We're going to talk about Chainmail today. We're completely redoing our format, just kind of keeping this as a conversation, keeping it loose, keeping it fun. Not going to spend 15 episodes on one game anymore. Let me see if I can share this. There we go. Share. All right. Yeah, so like I said, I just got done kind of glancing through the rules. Excuse me, I'm running on very little sleep. It was really funny. I was going through the rules, and like all of a sudden, it shifted to fantasy, and I went, "Wait a minute, did I miss a page here?" And yes, I did. I missed a page that said this is a fantasy supplement. So
Well, it's funny because some people would go ahead and suggest, at least when this game first came out, why is this even necessary? There were a lot of people out there who were very disappointed with this idea. Why not just go ahead and keep it a strictly medieval war game? But we have to put this in context. What was basically coming out again, becoming very popular once again during the early 70s? Lord of the Rings was on a huge upswing during this time period.
Oh yeah.
And then of course there's going to be a Ralph Bakshi movie coming on out, and everybody was really excited about fantasy. So when you take a look at the fantasy rules supplement in the Chainmail medieval war game rules, it is basically strictly lifted right out of Tolkien. There is a little bit of other elements lifted out of, like, say, for example, Lankmar by Fritz Lieber. You'll notice that when you talk about, and we'll talk about this probably later on, when you got the division between law and chaos. It's not good versus evil. It's just order versus disorder, and so on and so forth. Something which, by the way, gets picked up on by another game that we've already mentioned. We talked about, Warhammer 40,000 having that dichotomous issue. Either you're for the Empire and law and order, or you're chaos and you support Horus and all that. But anyway, yeah. So law and chaos. Well, that was from Fritz Lieber. But everything else, this is a nod and an attempt to go and grab that new audience that is very excited about this Lord of the Rings phenomenon.
So what year did this come out? This was what, 76?
Oh no, 73. I think is the actual first edition. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So this is the third edition, also autographed by Gary Gygax.
Yeah, the first edition, I'm sorry, was 71. Beg your pardon. Now I think about it, it was 71. Yeah, the one we're looking at, I think, was 73.
Because I'm flipping through the rules, I'm going, okay, I can. And I mean, this was like the mothership of almost all modern tabletop games, isn't it? Or tabletop war games.
This one right here is what I would call, I guess if you want to put it in a comic book phrase, this might be what you might refer to as your silver age of gaming. Just like the silver age of comics, things weren't exactly perfect or well polished, but there's some very interesting ideas that are being presented. And Chainmail was one in a series of war game rules that were being published and distributed amongst war game aficionados all over the country, but mostly here in the Midwest. And they were enjoying miniature wargaming that focused primarily on medieval, Napoleonic, or Civil War, although there were some ancients out there and people were into the modern. But if you really wanted to go ahead and get into the military modeling, because that was part of the hobby, the military modeling was the painting. And if you really wanted to get involved in the colors and the flashy, beautiful nature of a battlefield, you got to go Napoleonic, Civil War, or medieval.
Yeah, I saw where they were talking about the figures. I thought that was really cool. Where did I see that? Where they were saying, the scale of the figures was, where was
1 to 10 usually. One figure equals 10 men.
Well, they also had the scale of the figures, and they had different companies that they said buy the figures from these companies.
I see. I'm sorry. You're talking about the scale of the actual miniatures themselves. Yeah. Miniatures could go about 15 millimeter up to about 25 millimeter, if I remember off the top of my head back in the day.
So they want you to have roughly a 4 foot by 7 foot wide board. Why does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
More advantage.
Wargaming has not made any major changes in its basic format. You still have a pretty average size table, depending on the size of the battle, of course. And you still have miniatures that represent a certain number of troops, and you're maneuvering them using rulers. I mean, there's a lot that has not changed. I think the only
Here it is.
major changes that have occurred were Star Wars X-wing. When we talked about X-wing,
Oh
that
yeah,
game back well 2 seasons ago or whatever,
with
you
the
know
special
that
dice.
was yeah, the special dice, their
Yeah.
movement templates, and so on and so forth. But even that's a holdback, a throwback to, I should say, games like Jutland. But I know I digress. So go
Hey,
ahead.
so
I'm
what's
sorry.
this LGTSA medieval? This is the LGTSA medieval miniatures rules were developed primarily for use with. Here it is. I'm
Lake
not very
Geneva
good at.
Tactical Studies Association, if I
Wow.
remember what this stands
Oh
for.
my God.
Yes.
Give you $5 for knowing that. Jeez.
They're
Wow.
the forerunners to what would become Tactical Study Rules,
Huh.
TSR, and a bunch of people in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, which out of all places in the entire world, Lake Geneva becomes the epicenter of most of this activity. And if you've ever been to Lake Geneva, ever driven past Gary Gygax's house or the places where these people played, you're like, it just doesn't seem to go ahead and be the there doesn't seem to be a major reason for it, because Minneapolis, the Twin Cities area, that's where Dave Arneson was out of, and a few others, and they were producing war games out of there. But Lake Geneva, that kind of comes as a surprise. But anyway, yeah, so that's where they were publishing various miniature rules in Zine format, and basically making them on photocopiers or photo printers, I guess would be an appropriate term,
Yeah.
and sending them out, for $1 or $2 plus postage.
Yeah. So it's saying too, primarily for use with Elastion, Elast, Elastolin,
Mm-hmm.
and Starlux figures, which are 40 millimeter scale. I mean, Games
Oh yeah,
Workshop primarily uses about a 30, 32 millimeter scale roughly. So, I mean, these were a little bit bigger than that.
yeah. Those
Or the
wow.
inexpensive Airfix Robin Hood and
What
Sheriff
what
of
I'd like
Nottingham.
what I'd like you to go ahead and do is put a little footnote in the back of your head saying insert image here
All right.
during editing, because those miniatures are throwbacks to the old days of wargaming, when they were rather large. As a
Yeah.
matter of fact, the Games Workshop game, and I don't know why I keep going back to Games Workshop, but I'm trying to make a connection for the audience out there. They actually tried to do the same thing with their Inquisitor role-playing game, and Mutant Chronicles tried to do the same thing when they rebooted Mutant Chronicles to a larger miniature format. But generally speaking, people don't like the larger miniatures. They like to go ahead and use the 25 millimeter. And then, of course, if you don't have enough money, they're referring to um, some of those like army men figures that you could find
Yeah.
all over the place.
The 30 millimeter figures I find much easier for painting, and they can throw in more detail. The smaller the figure, the less detail you're able to put in. Obviously, the bigger one, the more
Right.
detail you're able to put in. The 40 is a little too big. Yeah, the 35 for me is just right. But I think it's funny how the rules have been play tested over a period of many months. I think I keep going back to Games Workshop or Warhammer because as of today, I mean they are like the Microsoft. They are the juggernaut of tabletop board gaming. They are the company right now.
Yes.
Not to say that there aren't a lot of companies biting at their heels here. You've got what was that game? There's that one game I always wanted to play, a Song of Fire and Ice. I mean, I glanced through the rules of that one. That's a real that looks like to be like a really fun game. I would love to give that a try, us sometime on Tabletop Simulator.
Yeah. And there's still a lot of companies out there that are doing historical tabletop. For example, Bolt Action is doing World War II miniatures, which has become a lot more popular than, say, Napoleonic and Civil War, because you don't necessarily have to have as many miniatures. And of course, there's the science fiction and fantasy elements that are out there. If anybody's interested, if you did not know this already, there's a website that's associated with Drive Through RPG, which is about war games, and they have all sorts of PDFs for war games if you're looking to go ahead and get into the hobby again, or for the first time.
Yeah. Now the turn sequence I thought was kind of neat because they have two different styles, or it looks like two different choices. You can do the move counter move system or the simultaneous movement system. I guess you would do, depending upon what game you want to play with whomever you're playing with. But I thought that was
Yeah.
kind of neat.
The first one is a variation on the one that we talked about with Ogre. The other one tries to make it a little bit more, react and move and react type. And we talked about this
Write
quite a
orders
bit.
for each of their units.
Yeah.
Because so you basically move. Well, this is interesting. You roll a die. So at the beginning of the turn, you roll a die, which is something we don't traditionally do today. So each turn you're not quite sure who's going first, and then the side that moves first, blah blah blah. This I thought was neat. The side that has the first move moves its figures and makes any split moves and missile fire, takes any pass-through fire possible at the same time. I went, holy crap! They did like 4, phases in just one turn. So I guess you're able to just pick and choose when you do this.
Well, there are certain units that are capable of firing their missile weapons during their movement. Like, for example, if you had
Yes.
Mongol horse cavalry, they
Yeah,
would be
they
able
move,
to
fire,
shoot their
then move
arrows.
again, right?
And then
Yeah.
there's also some variations on when you can shoot your missiles at an approaching enemy. But what they're
Okay.
trying to do is take into account the realism of the warfare without making the game entirely too complex. Like some other companies did. Like, for example, Starfleet Battles decided to go ahead and try to make a system in which it was almost as simultaneous as you could, but you had to move one
Oh my
space
God.
at a time.
That's a
And
game
you're
we ought to do.
oh my gosh, do we have a couple of hours per episode? It was
Dude, I still have the books.
yeah. Starfleet Battles is a fantastic. It's a fantastic example of a game, and I hope I get some people upset at this, of a game that was over engineered, and it was
It
designed
was
by an engineer.
totally over engineered.
Yes.
You had to you had your energy and you had to allocate it every single turn.
I have to allocate 1 point to life support every turn.
Right.
Shouldn't that be like just an automatic?
Nope.
But yeah, so we have, like you were saying, there's two different movement systems here depending on the complexity you wish to engage in. And some people like the simultaneous movement. As a matter of fact, a variation on that is when you have movement orders that are simply on like a chit or a counter or like a dial. The maneuver dial that you see in X-Wing is a very similar example to simultaneous movement orders that you're writing on, except this time
They did do it very well.
Yes.
I'm not sure what kind of orders you would write. I mean, both sides write orders. What, move, fire, duck? I mean,
Nope. Where you put down what direction you're going to move, if your unit's going to engage in a wheel or if it's going to engage in a flanking movement, you would write down orders such as, are you going to go prone? Are you going to charge that turn? So yeah, there was all sorts of different options. The direction and the distance would be part of that written order. Yeah, quite a bit.
Really opens up strategy and possibilities.
Yeah.
It's not so linear as, move, fire, charge, blah, blah, It's wow. That could be interpreted many different ways, and I see many, many hours of debate just on that first rule.
Yes.
Yeah, there's artillery, missiles, movement. I thought this was cool. They have, terrain, and, your terrain affects the movement, but the hill. Slows movement 50%, prevents all charge moves, but movement downhill is at a normal speed. I said, that's really cool. I hope there's a fact for this. It says slow movement 50 feet. Does that mean when you enter it, when you're on it, when you leave it, only when you're on it? When does the hill start? So if I have a movement of 6 and I go 2 inches normal, then now I'm on the hill. Now my movement's cut in half. So I only have 4 inches left, so I can only move 2 inches?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
That's essentially how it would work. And that's why many of these games employed referees, and that's where the game master concept comes from, is that the referee would be the person who would adjudicate any sort of discrepancies or arguments or anything else that came up, resolve hidden movement issues or whatever. And I guess we'll get to this later on. The referee would become very important when they were doing mining and counter mining, which would lead to dungeons and perhaps even a dragon.
So what's this terrain selection? Yeah, I thought this was kind of neat. On a number of 3x5 index cards, draw the following. 2 rivers, 1 marsh, 1 pond. What, you put them all on a 3x5, you cut them up, and then you draw
Yep, and then
and
you
then throw them
place
on
the
the board?
terrain. And this is not too unfamiliar to people who play modern war games. When you're setting up the terrain, you alternate who gets to place, and you place terrain in certain places to make the battlefield, unless you're playing some sort of historical scenario.
Hmm. Now the movement, it's pretty fixed depending upon the type of unit. It's your fix
Yep.
and your charge and stuff. And you've got your formations. Okay, so the formations cause movements to change.
Yep.
So you can have a column, you can have a line, you can have a column square, a line square. But to go from a line column to a column line would cost you a movement. No,
Yep.
no. Oh, I get it. To go from a column to a line would cost you one movement.
Yeah. One entire movement phase.
Okay, so if I had columns. I don't get it. So if I had a
Eight.
column of 4 people deep,
Okay.
what do they mean by a line?
A line then would take those 16 soldiers and put them in a line that's usually either 1 or 2 soldiers deep.
Oh, okay. I gotcha. And then it looks like turning also costs movements,
Hmm.
left, right, fatigue. This I cringed when I read about fatigue, dude. I
Yeah.
cringed trying to keep track of this. I mean, moving 5 consecutive turns. You
Yeah.
better have a piece of paper written down. I mean,
Again, referee. This
how
this
many
made a yeah.
turns is a typical game?
Since the turns moved fairly quickly because there wasn't that much going on, it was just a question of maneuvering and then dicing and then morale. You could probably get a good 10, 15 moves in a 3 hour game, two,
Wow.
3 hour game. Yeah.
Jeez. And then they got missiles. Okay, yeah, so here's that split fire move. So the horsemen armed with bows are permitted to perform this type of movement. To accomplish a split move and fire the horse archers move up to, okay, 1/2 their normal movement, fire their missiles, and then move the remaining 45 degrees.
And John, let
Uh,
me ask you,
wow.
what does that sound familiar with?
Remaining
What does that
movement.
sound familiar with?
Honestly, the first thing I thought of, I hate to say it, but I'm going back to Warhammer 40,000, is the ability to move, charge, and then like withdraw. Move, attack, and then withdraw as a stratagem in the same turn.
What about the GEV from Ogre?
Oh yeah, that's true. You're right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Ogre was what, 70 something?
79, yeah.
Okay, so that came out after. That's
Hmm.
right. The GEV could move, fire, and then it itself got a second movement.
Yep.
That's true. You're right. I forgot about that. So that would be the equivalent of basically a horseman with a bow. Okay, I can see the principle behind it. And then they do firing arcs. That's interesting. I can see that being a real pain in the butt.
Because remember, for everybody who's listening and everybody who's watching, this is a tactical game, but not a skirmish game. The soldiers, as I mentioned earlier, one figure represents usually 10 soldiers. So your formations have to be taken into account, trying to maneuver men and keep them in an orderly fashion. And so facing becomes very important because they're all trying to move in one direction, so they won't be able to go ahead and shoot their missile weapons in the other direction, or perhaps even defend themselves versus attack. So yeah, everything was precise in this type of a game.
Yeah, I mean, here's the catapults, which I thought was kind of cool. Hit areas. So minimum
Yeah.
15, maximum 30. Hit area 2 inches, much like what Warhammer Fantasy Battle used to have with their templates.
What's interesting though is that you don't roll a die.
Did they
This
just
this
hit?
goes back this goes back to some naval war games like by Fletcher Pratt and others,
Uh-huh.
who would literally say, okay, estimate the range. Literally, you go ahead and say, okay, I think that's 18 inches away, and then if you're right, you have a danger space, and within that danger space is a hit on the other person's naval ship. That's what they're doing here with the catapult, essentially saying you estimate the range, and then if you're right, we'll see if the troops are in the danger space and take casualties
So when
or
I
the
say
wall.
I'm okay, so when I'm launching my light catapult. And I say, okay, I'm going to fire it at your French guys. I fire the catapult. I say, I think it's 20 inches away, and
Yep.
then I measure.
Yep.
What happens if
If
I'm
you,
off?
then you miss.
Oh, I see. So I measure, and I mean that's where it lands,
Yep.
and then I have a
And
hit area
within,
of 2 inches.
yep. And if
Okay.
anything's within that 2 inches, they're going to take casualties.
Okay. I gotcha. Yeah, rate of fire, blah blah blah. Oh, there's stuff near for the gunpowder weapons.
Arquebuses and another very, very early hand cannon.
I
Oh, and
was
of
really
course the
interested.
bombards.
I was really interested in the point system
Hmm.
because I mean that is the bane of any tabletop war game. Trying to help keep things balanced. Let's see, they got bombards, rate of fire. Where are the points? I know they got
The
them.
morale rules were extremely
Oh yeah,
complex.
were they really?
Yeah.
The side with the fewer casualties determines the positive difference between their losses. Yeah, I read something here about prisoners.
Yeah. Lots of math.
Oh gosh, math is cool, but man, I don't want to do it all the time when I'm playing the game. I mean, it just really slows it down.
Well, what
Okay,
they were
so
trying to do is
uh,
remember they were trying to simulate medieval warfare. So many of these guys were not concerned with complexity and they were trying to achieve realism,
I guess that's true.
which is the exact opposite of where most war gamers are going, or at least more games like Games Workshop are going now, which is just make this as simple as possible and forgo any sort of realism.
That is true, and honestly, I really do like their ninth edition 40k rules, and their Age of Sigmar rules have gotten really good as well. Not too thrilled with what they did with the armies in Age of Sigmar, but I really do like the simplicity of the rules. They have morale factors. Let's see, flanking, melee options, optionals for added realism. Here it is, prisoners. Okay, so prisoners. Before the losing side falls back from a melee, both players roll a die to determine if a prisoners are taken from the losing side. So what? They just grab people and hold them prisoner right then and there.
Yeah, that would happen actually quite frequently in warfare, is when
Huh.
one side realized that they were, in this type of melee, literally the melee was going on. And if people were dying all around you or running away, you may not be able to get away because you're basically in the middle of this melee. So dozens upon dozens, if not even hundreds of troops could surrender. And in many cases, it
Yeah.
was advantageous for you to take prisoners because there was all sorts of ransoms that you, or varigilds, if you wish, that you could go ahead and collect depending on the status of the prisoner. If they were just a peasant, you might, get a pitchfork for them. But needless to
Yeah.
say, a little bit of Christian morality probably came into play. If you weren't totally absorbed in the heat of the moment, you might go ahead and spare your enemy if they did surrender and provide some sort of charitable.
Use morale again. I thought we just looked at a chapter of morale.
Yeah, different types of morale systems. I mean, it
Huh.
is a little bit over the top. And one is for melee, and if I remember right, the other one might be just overall battlefield
Oh,
morale.
okay. Yeah. I think you're right. This is instability due to excess casualties.
Right.
So like if a unit has lost more has if a unit has lost more of a percentage or a certain percentage of it, like looks like the average here is 25 to 50%. You need to roll. Now are they talking 2d6? Oh, here it's
Yes,
by
that's a 2d6. Everything here uses
rolling
a
two
six.
dice. Okay,
Yep. Yep.
gotcha. So light peasants, if you take 25% or more casualty in your units, you need to roll an 8 or better. Oof.
Yeah. They're not going to stick around.
No, we're out of here. We're gone.
Yep.
Good luck, knights.
And again, for those of you who are trying to draw connections between, modern games such as, Warhammer, you can see where all this is coming from. The antecedents for all that stuff are right here. Morale levels,
Yeah,
types of casualties, leadership values, I guess, would be an extension from this idea.
Yeah, so here's organizations, levies, mercenary. Oh, they got mercenaries, peasants.
I love the idea your mercenaries can turn on you.
Oh, can they really?
Yeah.
Mercenary troops. Practically any kind of troop can be designated as mercenaries. For example, an army that normally would be unable to field a body of pikemen could do so by opting to hire a formation of mercenary pikemen. Trouble is that these troops are likely to change sides at the drop of a hat.
And they did. Historically, they did.
For
Depending on, of
each
course,
turn,
mercenary. Yeah. Yeah. Kind of
if
a,
you roll a 1, if a 1 is rolled, they merely stand still that turn, doing absolutely nothing except defending themselves if attacked. If you roll 2 through 5, they obey orders on a 6. A second roll must be made. A die roll of 1, pay more. 2, they're out of here, they march off the board. 3, bribed, may join the march to join the enemy.
yes.
4 to 6, carry out orders normally. That's hilarious. Enemy units. Russians, Poles, Mongols.
Yeah, here's where we start to see
Wow.
the historical significance, and this is where things get interesting because each unit has its own variable special abilities, but nothing like you would find in a modern war game such as
Yeah,
Warhammer
no kidding.
40K.
Scots infantry, Spanish, no one inspects. Uh, get some armored foot. I thought this was hilarious. China, Korea, Japan.
Yeah, the third edition of the game, well, second edition as well of Chainmail, tried to go ahead and expand the possibilities of wargaming to other areas. So in case you didn't want to just have, the typical Christians fighting Christians in a feudal setting, you could go ahead and do crusades. You could go ahead and do Mongols versus Chinese. There were some options that you could go, or even Mongols versus Poles. And there was all sorts of interesting historical options using this set of rules.
It would be cool. They got morale. Morale again, but this is for a China, Korea, Japan. Baggage. Loot. Weather. I thought this was kind of neat. Weather. That's something that's not put into play very much. I know when we usually play, we usually don't even take that into account. We just play.
Weather tends to be window dressing in role playing games, just part of the
Yeah.
narrative. They usually don't have any major effect unless you have a spell that somehow does do something to weather, and then everybody gets all excited that it's raining or windy.
Yeah. Ooh, something different. Yeah. Point values. Now, I did read, like, way up in the very beginning, they said usually games have a 300 point per side value. So, how did you put together your army? I guess that's what I'm looking for.
Well, if you were doing a free-form scenario, um, you basically could go ahead and put together whatever army you wanted to if you just had the points. Now, what would happen is you'd probably run into some historical individual who would say, "Well, wait, you have a complete imbalance between so and so forces, and like for example, your heavy foot and your levies." But I don't think the build your own scenarios ran into that many issues that often. If you're running something historical, that was predetermined. But needless to say, it was pretty open, if I remember correctly. Now, I haven't constructed an army in an extraordinarily long time, so I hope nobody finds out if I'm wrong or if I have made a misquote there. But unless there was
Send
historical
email around
argument,
nothing at gmail.com. No.
yeah, unless there was an historical argument, you were pretty open to build whatever you wanted to, as long as you weren't mixing nationalities. That was verboten no matter what. I mean, the only time you could mix nationalities is if you had mercenaries, like we just mentioned, and only if you were talking about Swiss or perhaps even some German mercenaries or whatever the case may be.
I mean, it looks like they like typed this thing up on. It kind of threw it together compared to like how we see books today with rules. Because now they've got things for movable, uh, movable mantlets. I had to look that up. I didn't know what those were. I had to look. I'm like, what
Yeah,
the heck's a mantlet?
massive. Yeah, you got siege towers now, and you've got. This is where we start getting into the man-to-man aspect of the game. When you conduct sieges, you got siege towers, you got You've got siege engines such as battering rams, covered battering rams, and so on and so forth. Mining and counter mining. This is where things can get very interesting very
Boiling
quickly.
oil,
Yes.
rocks, mines, counter mines, breaches, man-to-man combat. Okay, so I mean, did I miss the points? Or
I
am
think
I
you
just
did.
thinking of this too literal? Oh, okay, here it is.
Yeah. There you are.
Suggested point values. Here we go. Peasants, half a point. What, per model? Yeah, per
Yep.
model.
Per
Okay.
model.
Okay.
Now
This is
there are
also
some you are some notes you can see down there about trying to go ahead and balance and make sure you're not being totally ridiculous, but generally speaking, no. Oh, you
yeah.
did miss the jousting rules, by the way.
Oh, dude, I missed a lot of stuff. Okay, let me go back. I like blew past the man-to-man combat. Here it is. Hand-to-hand's kind of important.
And
Missile fire.
this is where weapon differentiation comes into its full glory, because now your weapon type will be cross-referenced against your actual armor to determine whether or not you score a kill. And it's no longer based on just generic heavy foot versus light foot or whatever. Now you actually have your weapons and your armor cross-referenced on the chart, which we could probably show them at some point.
Yeah. Missile fire melee. First blow is struck the attacker unless unless the defender has a weapon which is 2 classes higher, or the defender is fighting from above. Okay, so how do I do an attack?
In the man-to-man system,
Yeah.
okay, really quickly, if you want to go back to the back pages where they have the man-to-man combat matrices.
Okay, I'm on page 25. Oh, fantasy combat table, fantasy reference table. Oh, here's the jousting matrix. Oh my gosh.
Yep. Where you get to choose your actual position for your shield and your lance and everything else.
Here it is. Man-to-man melee table. Sorry, it's
Yes.
vertical. You have to tilt your head to the left to see this one.
Are you doing this on a PDF or are you doing it through Zoom?
A PDF.
You should be able to go to the top and rotate.
Yeah.
There's a tool that you can rotate the view.
I think I'm making this worse.
Well, hang on a second. Keep scrolling. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's much better.
I guess it just depends on the page, but yeah, if
Hold
you just keep scrolling down because I think you had it.
Did I? Okay, hold on.
Yeah, keep scrolling or up. Oh dear.
Okay. I got it.
All right.
Here's the fantasy. Oh, that's the fantasy
Yeah.
combat table.
Yeah, it's
Who
entirely
cares?
different. Just keep going backwards in page numbers. Fantasy
Okay.
reference. Keep going. Nope. No, yeah, there you go.
Here it is.
There we
Okay,
go. That's the
I
thing.
got it.
There we go.
Got it.
All right. So we'll edit all that out.
No, we won't. We're gonna keep it all in.
Professionals. Okay. So what you do is if you're within melee range, 1 inch, 1 space, or 1 square if you wish, now you can go ahead and enter man-to-man melee table. And here you can see they were talking about the aforementioned weapon class, and that's the 1, 2, 1, 1, 3, 4, 5, 6. The lower weapon classes represent smaller, lighter weapons, and the higher weapons represent the ones that are larger and longer. So as you can see, if I charge somebody with a pike, they're going to be able to stab at me before I can even get near them if I have just a dagger. But anyway, so I find my weapon, I cross-reference it with the armor that is being used, and I roll 2d6 or higher, and then I score a kill. No hit points, kill.
Just dead.
Now, if you go to the fantasy rules in this
Hold
game,
on. So they
Okay.
don't take skill into account. So a peasant has the exact same chance to kill something as a knight.
fantastically simple, isn't it?
Wow. I'm getting a lot of
Which
peasants.
Now if you're being realistic, a peasant. If you think about it, go back to that table again.
All right.
A peasant is not going to have very many of those weapons because they're not going to be trained in those weapons. So the best that they might have is a flail, maybe, and a dagger and a
Well, I
hand
guess that's
axe.
true. And I mean,
And
a peasant isn't going to be wearing plate mail armor
right,
either.
and they
Okay.
won't be wearing any armor, or maybe leather or padded at the most. So
Okay.
if they're truly equipped logically and historically, they're not going to be as effective. But you are right. When people played around with this, some of them had to put modifiers in there, and this is where you start getting into the role playing aspect of experience and training and skills and so on and so forth.
Okay. So here's the jousting matrix.
Mm-hmm.
The hell's the matrix? Wow, that's a heck of a matrix. Helm, DC, CP, SC. I don't even know what that is.
Well, that's your aiming point on the shield. And I'm not even going to try to go ahead and explain or try to pronounce that properly. But the aiming point on the shield, you have Dexter on the right side, which would be the left, and you
I
have
get it. I get it.
Sinistre on the left side. For those of you who are starting to guess from your words, Dexter means the right hand, and that's why we get ambidextrous, means you can use both hands like your right hand.
I didn't
And
know that.
Sinistre, yeah, Sinistre, anything that comes at you with sinister motives must have come from the left hand, because you usually see all your weapons in your right hand. So if somebody stabs you with the left hand dagger, that was a sinister ploy, Sinistra. So
Oh,
there
I
you
see.
go.
Dexter, pale,
Mhm.
sinister. So why is the sinister on? Oh, never mind.
Because that's
Because that's looking at it from the person attacking you.
yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. Okay, I get it.
And
So
then
okay,
I
so
will
then I
choose
pick
my
what I'm hitting then.
yes, and then I choose my defensive position, and then we cross-reference that and see what happens, and could result in me being knocked off. I mean, there's no dice rolling here. This is just what happens happens.
Huh. I guess if a person's really good at having this memorized or looked at, so if you attack and you say I'm aiming at the CP,
Rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock, something.
yeah. So if I want a miss, I just wonder if there's a magical formula. It's like playing computerized football. You find that magical play where you automatically get 5 yards, and you just keep
Right.
playing that same play over and over and over again, and you win the game, and it's no fun anymore. I wonder if the jousting is kind of the same way.
I would have to imagine, again, not having played it through very often, that at some point you realize that there are certain moves you can make, and probably come out with a greater chance of success.
Yeah.
But I think that's what they have, that little chart on the side. It says PDP, AP, possible defensive positions considering aiming points. You know, that kind of gives you your odds, if you wish. But
See, I thought the 1 through 6 may have been a dice roll. You roll
no,
a 1d6. Okay.
no randomness here. It's all based upon rock, paper, scissors.
That's kind of cool. Then there's the man-to-man melee, and then here's everything else. Okay, so let me get back up to page 25. There we go. Man-to-man combat. We talked about that a little bit. Here's the point value system. Pretty cool, actually. Here's
Yep.
the point. It's on one page. It's 2 paragraphs. Done. Peasants are half a point. Light foot is 1 point. A heavy foot, troop is 2 points. Done. I mean, going back to Warhammer 40,000 is a nightmare in point balancing system. They are forever fine tuning it, to get their
Yes.
armies balanced. And I kind of, in ninth edition, they basically took all the armies and destroyed them and said, we're starting from scratch. We're coming out with these armies.
And you can
here's
kind
this.
of blame Starfleet battles for that. Let's go back and blame them for something else. Starfleet battles, I mean, there were point values that for each one of your ships, and depending on the weapon options, that could modify the point values. And you would spend times, and spend several hours sometimes customizing your fleets and sometimes the weapons on each ship. It got to the point where it was like, can we just play?
Yeah, yeah. No kidding. There's the pikes. And then here's our magical page, fantasy supplement.
Yep.
What year did l- that Lord of the Rings animation come out? You know, the
Oh,
first
I
one.
want to say,
Was that 78, 79, or is that early
um,
80s?
no, it's probably right around Star Wars because Star Wars put everything into motion. So 77, 78.
Okay,
I'm
yeah.
going to go ahead and pretend that I am searching my real memory and not actually hitting Wikipedia at this particular sector. So we can
Wikipedia is
edit
your
out that
friend.
I'm looking at Wikipedia right now. But yeah, you caught me there without knowing here. So I'm going to look this up. Lord of the
Nothing
Rings.
wrong. Nothing wrong with looking it up. Fantastic characters. We got hobbits, sprites, dwarves, goblins, elves. I thought it was funny. They have Balrogs
Right, and
in
that's
here.
right from Lord of the Rings. Yeah, 1978. Hey, I was right.
Hey, hey, see, you got it.
I remembered. My
You could,
memory intact.
you could write Wikipedia. Anybody can. Um, yeah, they got spells. It looks like. So yeah, so it looks like they added in a supplement for uh, a fantasy.
And basically, each unit, whether it be halflings, orcs, goblins, or whatever, are classified as light foot or heavy foot, depending on defense or offense, or sometimes it's the same. And then
Mm-hmm.
they have little small special abilities like halflings, as you would imagine. If you get a bunch of them together, are going to be hyper accurate with missile fire. Orcs would suffer penalties in the daylight, and so on and so forth. Balrogs and dragons cause fear, and then have other abilities. The section on dragons is interesting, as far as how they can just mess your day up. Wizards,
Oh,
they
mm-hmm.
had a list of spells,
Just
and
ents.
this was where things are interesting. In this version of
Dragons.
the
There it
game,
is.
wizards could cast a spell if they made a die roll.
Uh
When
huh.
they made Dungeons and Dragons, they switched to what they called the Vancian System, which was based on a series of books around the concept of what was referred to as the Dying Earth by Jack Vance, in which a person would memorize something, and then that would become a formula, and then they would cast a spell, and then that formula would be erased from their mind. So
Huh.
that's where you get the whole concept of what we call today spell slots and so on and so forth.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, but back with Chainmail, the original fantasy was all just a question of, hey, can I cast a spell or roll the dice and see?
So that's that, and then at the end of the book, we have all of our charts and tables and all the fun geeky stuff that we like to have printed out and put in front of us. And
Yeah, if you want to scroll down real quick to the law and chaos table that we just scroll up, beg your pardon. Um, that's what I was mentioning earlier. In the fantasy version of the game, you will have your forces
oh,
right there. Your forces are going
law,
to be
natural
divided
chaos.
between, yep,
Okay,
between those three alignments. And the original D&D only had those three alignments. And
that's true. It did,
then,
didn't it?
yep, and then Gygax decided to add in the concepts of good and evil, so you would have your traditional 9 alignments matrix, if you wish,
Mm-hmm.
that would evolve from that,
In which we still use today.
not counting fourth edition's very strange system. But yeah, we won't mention that.
Never touched fourth edition. I went from second edition, and I believe I jumped all the way to 5e.
Yeah, fourth edition was had its merits. It was fun. I had some aspects that were very entertaining, but it kind of digressed from role playing. It was really just basically, let's play a computer, MMO
Oh, was it
on a
really?
tabletop. Yeah, that's essentially what it was.
I mean, if I wanted to do that, I would actually play a computer tabletop MMO.
Well, that's why fourth edition didn't do very well overall because
Ah,
people were like, wait, where's the role playing? Where's the character building? It's nothing. You're doing nothing more than just. As a matter of fact, here's a little interesting tidbit. Many people said Pathfinder 2 has several similarities with fourth edition D&D
really?
in that there's very limited amount of choice when you go ahead and increase your levels.
Really?
Um, yeah, some people have made that comparison.
Wow.
Yeah.
I kind of thought the opposite, but then again, maybe I'm looking at it from a different point of view because I haven't played with that system. That, like I said, since like Dungeons and Dragons 2.0 or
Yeah,
a
if you would
second
have
edition.
played, yeah, third edition D&D or 3.5/Pathfinder, the
Yeah.
character creation and leveling up process was a lot more complex. There was a lot more moving pieces involved and a lot more options, which made the game very cumbersome when you started getting into higher levels for some people. But hey, to each their own. There's still a wide variety of people out there playing fourth edition today, and Pathfinder first edition is still a
Oh
thing.
yeah, that's still alive and well. I really like the Pathfinder second edition, although I do find the characters' abilities and skills to become very cumbersome at the higher levels. It's
Yeah,
like,
I would agree.
yeah, but I
Pathfinder Second Edition, has some great role playing and character building things about levels 1 through 6 or 7. Then things start to get a bit overpowering, as you and I both know. When we played it, the game system seems to favor the player characters very much after you get
it
like around
does.
seventh, eighth, ninth level.
Yeah, well, that also might be my fault because I was holding back a little bit. I'm not anymore, as a few of you have seen. Yes,
Oh
you
yeah,
took 80 points of damage. Good luck.
no kidding.
I do like how, and I don't mean to diverge from Chainmail, but like in Pathfinder Second Edition, they added in these archetypes, which I absolutely love. It's not a dual class; it's like a half class almost, where you get a taste of that particular class without actually becoming better than the person who's actually in that class.
Yeah, multi-classing was a bit wonky from the get-go, and it usually ended up creating some extraordinarily dispowered characters. Everybody used to say, well, the trade-off is it costs you, almost twice or more experience points to gain levels. But I mean, the other side of it is I get the benefits of both classes. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
back in the days of first edition, you'd have your fighter magic users, running around plate armor
Right.
and casting fireball. I'm like,
Uh huh.
okay,
Sure. Why not?
whatever. Yeah.
Now, if I wanted to get chainmail, I found the product list back here. Apparently, I could get chainmail for $5. Can I
Yeah.
still get chainmail for $5?
As a PDF from Drive Through RPG, you can.
Get out! Can you really?
Yes, you can, and you can print it out to your heart's content. For your own personal use only. I'm not advocating anybody doing anything illegal, but
Now, if
yeah,
I
you can
wanted,
still find it.
now if I wanted the books, I mean, I'm sure I could go into a bookstore and get this for $5, right?
No, if
No.
you wanted to find this version of chainmail that we're looking at now, $75 to $100 on eBay.
Ooh,
If you wanted to find the first edition of this game, which was in a brown cover, we're looking at between $600 and $1,200.
I'm very sad. I sold my version of that. All right, Tactical Studio rules. Looks like they have some other stuff you can buy way in the back. Boot Hill. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Oh my god, I did not realize Boot Hill was that old. Holy cow.
yeah. Boot Hill goes back to when the floodgates opened. Everybody was experimenting with how do we go ahead and create a miniature slash role playing game. Boot Hill was a mostly miniatures, but it did go ahead and have some role playing elements, and as it holds
This,
a
oh my god.
very special place in my heart.
I wonder if I could. I don't think I could swear at one point I had a game called Boot Hill.
Well, Boot Hill is available as a reprint on
Is
Drive
it?
Through RPG. You can get a hard copy of it. It's $10.
This is great. Multi-side dice, a 20-side, a 12-side, 8, 6, and 4-sided die for $2.50.
And they are going for $150 now. That same exact set.
Oh my gosh, you're kidding.
Yeah, yeah, because
Wow.
the people want those nostalgic dice.
Ooh, a little rich for my blood. Anyway, Rob, is there anything else?
No, I think we covered everything that we wanted to. I hope this new format appeals to people, that we're just kind of, giving them a taste. And again, what I want everybody to do, and what I think John, you and I talked about, is if you want us to explain more as per rules explained, email us, message us, something, and we will go ahead and devote some time to going through some more detail. But this is an appetizer. Look
Yep.
at it, see what you think about it, and if you're from TSR, feel free to contact us and let us know how much you appreciate our efforts to bring back the hobby to what it
Are
used
they
to
actually
be.
still around?
Yes, some of these guys are. Of course, Gary Gygax unfortunately passed away just a few years back, and so
Well, no,
did
no. I
Dave
mean the actual
Arneson.
company, TSR. Are they actually
Oh
still
no,
around?
well, okay, TSR and its original format, no.
Yeah,
It got into bankruptcy trouble, and then Wizards of the Coast bought them out and ruined
that's
everything.
right.
Um, but there is a game company called TSR. that we released a couple of small 5e related products, and they somehow managed to get the license for Top Secret, which was an
Oh, get out.
espionage, yeah, espionage-based role-playing game. And they did a Kickstarter for crowdfunding, and but they haven't done anything since. So I guess it's gone and done. But theoretically, TSR does exist on some level.
Awesome. All right, guys. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything, please email us at rulesexplained@gmail.com. You can find us on all the podcasting sites, find us on YouTube, all that fun stuff, blah, blah, blah. I'm John Merritt.
I'm Rob Nothing.
Guys, thanks for listening.
Adios.